America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. You're watching The Black Athenians, and I come to you every Friday around 4-ish and try to give you a quality of political knowledge and wisdom that you might not get in school, but are really kind of will help you turn your life into meaning and help you get free. Right? So a lot of our problems are political problems, except when they're not announced as political problems, but they're announced as a problem with like your person. So if you get a vision board or change your diet so you don't eat gluten anymore or something like that, that'll help you, fix your life. But that's just not the truth. That's a lie. The problem is you don't have enough power or freedom in your life or self-determination in your life. And it's not just in your head, it's in the structures of society. So I try to give you a quality of political education that kind of introduces you to the levers of power in your society that will then affect your life and how to think about your life in a way that kind of is productive of meaning, in a way that it might not be productive of meaning as it stands. So today we're going to talk about the rabble. What are the rabble? So I do a lot of work on this 19th century philosopher named Hegel, and he was dealing with kind of an industrial society where there are all these people who are out of work, who don't have a place in civil society because, the market moved them. For example, if you're an Uber driver right now, it's not a good time to be an Uber driver. I suspect it's not a good time to be a casino dealer. Right? The market moved too fast. When I explain this to kids, the students, I usually talk about how, if you were a Zune developer or a Blockbuster video manager, one of my kids is invading right now. When I explain it to the other kids, when I explain it to my students, I talk about, let's say you were a designer for Zune or something like that, and you spend 10 years thinking that I'm going to build my brand with the Microsoft company. Then all of a sudden Zune goes out. And so you are just without a job, or a Tower Records executive who only knew Tower Records stuff, right? So there's a way in which the market moves so fast that it could leave a lot of people out in a lurch. For Hegel, he understood that jobs are very important for your identity and your sense of power in civil society. But also the market is unstable. It's awesome insofar as it's dynamic. It can create things and negotiate the world and for us in a way that allows us to be free. For example, I don't have to grow everything now. I can just go to Kroger and it will have, what I need, especially if there's a Publix next door, and the competition between the two will create a world where that's pretty much organized for me, which is great. And I could do other things that add to the market, and they'll pay me, and then I can go and get my food at Kroger, and I don't have to do everything. I was talking before about how one of the aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown is that we're all doing a little bit too much. So it's kind of knocked us into a primitive way of life, insofar as I have to both do this video, study, and watch my zillion kids. And that's not making me do all of it as well as I could possibly, but that's the point or that's one of the burdens of the COVID-19 pandemic, is that it gets rid of this division of labor and division of risk and division of responsibility that kind of makes civil society work. Right. So in civil society, there are these volunteer, slightly market-based, actually largely market-based institutions that kind of launder our wills and freedom so that we work in a way that reinforces other people's freedom. And they're kind of set with competition and marketing, and there are a lot of dynamics in play, but that's pretty much what's going on. The problem is that the market is so dynamic that it could leave people in a lurch. So you might study 10 years for a profession, and then all of a sudden there's one innovation, and then that profession is irrelevant. And what do you do? What do you do? Where do you get your meaning? Where do you get your power? Right? So for Hegel, there are two different types of people who find themselves numbered among the rabble. Those are the people the market, civil society, freedom, and civil society has just missed. One is the poor rabble. These are the people who, for example, stigmatized minorities. The private labor market has never absorbed us at fair wages and working conditions, never. So we are functionally rabble extraneous. So they're the poor rabble who the market just leaves behind and doesn't absorb at fair conditions. And then there are the wealthy rabble, and he likens these to like stock speculators, people who don't make money, who don't make their lives by being a valuable participant in the market, but by just kind of parasites on market interactions, right? So they have as much disdain for like actual productive work as the people who've been cast out of productive work. But they're just the gamblers on the market. He's like, they're not really involved in civil society insofar as they don't have any real, not just power, but they don't have any real stake in it. They don't have any real dignity in it. They're just parasites. So there's the wealthy rabble, the gamblers who go with the swings of the market. And then there's the poor rabble who are workers, but they've been left behind for some reason due to the dynamics of the market. All right, so why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because I was watching a video on poverty in Los Angeles, and apparently it's disproportionately black, and there's the segment with Adam Carolla and Tucker Carlson, two people who are whatever in terms of political thought, but they actually were grasping towards an interesting dynamic, whereas there are all these people in Los Angeles who are so poor, we can't actually expect them to obey the law, and we can't actually fine them because they don't have money. And since Los Angeles is kind of like, a liberal city, everyone's so nice, they don't put them in jail like they did in New York during Giuliani. So they're just kind of there and homeless, but they're not a part of society in a way. They are there and omnipresent, but they are also emancipated from society insofar as you can't fine them. They are homeless. You can't just put them in jail because they didn't actually do anything. They run little markets, like there are underground markets that are completely unregulated, and which means they aren't actually institutions of freedom. They're just like, they could be, there's no license for anything, right? So there's no quality control. There's not the FDA that can inspect these underground markets. So what does it mean to have so many people in Los Angeles who are just casted off in a way that you can't actually police, punish, or care for them in any systematic way? And like I said, this is distinct from like those places where they just put all these people in jail. It's better than that, but it doesn't actually solve the problem of like, what does it mean to have a society full of so many people who are cast off? Like I talked to anyone who listened about like I was born in Los Angeles, and I moved to Orange County in high school. Then I moved up to Northern California, at 18 to go to school, and I stayed for a stretch up there. And I like Northern California, but the deal is I'm just priced out of California in general. I would love to go back to California. I'm priced out of California. So now I'm in Athens, Georgia. But what happens to those people who don't have the, self-awareness to know that they too are priced out of California and they are in California, right? So they're just on the street. And this is why the homeless population in Los Angeles is, enormous. So what do you do with these people who actually you can't police because you can't just put them in jail for being poor, but you can't exactly discipline them with fines or because they're not a part of productive society? What does that mean? And I think that's a fascinating question. Well, I think the answer to this is a federal job guarantee. If you're willing to work, we get you a job. There's a lot of work to be done. Those people who say like, well, automation will do the job. No, that's not. There's a lot of care work and human work that needs to be done. And it only gets done for wealthy people because they can afford and are kind of structured to exploit like a laboring force that will do that work for cheap, right? So we subsidize and pay for that work to be done, and we universalize it so everybody has elder care. We cut classrooms down to 10, and we just pay people to do the work that needs to be done. Right? So I think you need a federal job guarantee to actually get rid of the poor rabble. The poor rabble. And you could say that, well, people don't want to work a job. That's not true. People don't want to be exploited on the job. You give people a fair job. It doesn't have to even be 40 hours a week. Anywhere from 30, full-time could be anywhere from, 28 even. But 30 to 35 hours a week, 28 to 32 hours, 28 to 40 hours a week, and then pay overtime if you go over 40. That will give people standing in civil society. We pay these jobs $20 an hour, and it will actually and actually fulfill a need of work that the market's not producing, or only produces at prohibitive prices. They'd be cleaning old people's gutters and like reading to old people, and there's just a bunch of care work that doesn't get done, only gets done for wealthy people. And also cultural work. I tell you, if it were up to me, every person over 70 would get a visit from a 3-person videography team who would set up in their living room or wherever and just take their story for 2 hours, where the old person just tells them their truth, and then it's just put in the Library of Congress in an easily indexable database. And I think that would be a fundamental cultural archive for us to build our world. And that's a federal job that just doesn't happen. So we don't think about what culture needs in terms of and culture is what the institutions that teach us how to turn our freedom into meaning. And nature is the fact nature deals with instincts and culture deals with how we use our freedom, and we don't have the cultural infrastructure that we need. So a lot of people have a hard time managing their freedom in a way that turns freedom into meaning. Right. So I think the state should more robustly provide a cultural infrastructure, and could do this through a federal job guarantee. And also having a productive job is a form of power, because real power isn't, you could say, just put everyone on dole, give them $1,000 a month or $1,200 a month. $1,200 a month isn't a lot of money. If you actually want to make moves in Los Angeles, I don't even know if you can you can get an apartment for $1,200 a month in Los Angeles, but I suspect not. You'd have to share, and still you wouldn't have a lot of money left over. So that's just not a lot of money to make moves. And even if you save, you could save $1,200 a month for 10 years and have that all wiped out if you want to buy like a used car or something goes wrong with the transition. So that's not real money. Just putting everyone on welfare. And even if you put everyone on a more substantive welfare, that's not real power, because power comes through being able to form what's being produced in civil society, right? And you could say cutting grass isn't really a powerful, paying me $15, $20 an hour to cut grass 30 hours a week isn't really a powerful place in civil society. Well, that's why you need to be unionized, right? So you remember a few years ago when the government shut down, Trump shut down the government, and there was a big standoff, and the woman who broke it was the flight attendants union. The flight attendants union head, Sarah Nelson, and she the flight attendants saying open up government or we won't serve drinks and do everything else that flight attendants do. And that's a real problem for both safety and hygiene. So in that space, as a flight attendant with a group of flight attendants, you reopen the government, because that's the kind of power you have in civil society as a producer for civil society. So these people who say that these menial or low-wage jobs aren't important or don't have any power, that's actually just because they've misconstrued how these low-wage jobs can be organized, right? So you need to give people a job and also the organizational infrastructure so that they have power on the job, and so they can actually affect production, because real power is in the ability to affect production. Right, so you want to pay them fairly, but also give them say in their conditions sector-wide so that they can actually, have a little bit of power through their job. And you need and have that job be valuable. All right, so we have to think carefully about what we do with the rabble, the cast-offs of society, and not leave them to some other person's charity, because that's not actually an institution of freedom or right. If you're just susceptible to other people's charity, your will, your rights, and self-determination. It's not self-determination. You're determined by other people's appetites, and your activities are always going to be determined by other people's appetites asymmetrically. Like in all group systems, other people's appetites matters and other people's judgments matters. But if it's organized well, it's a symmetrical relationship. If your life is run by charity, it's an asymmetrical relationship. And that's why you need a standing in civil society that guarantees some sort of symmetrical power. Right. So we have to think about what to do with not just homelessness, but just the problem of the rabble. All of these people who have been cast off by market-based civil society. And, one symptom is that they end up homeless. Another symptom is that they just end up powerless, which isn't much better. I mean, it's better insofar as you're not being eaten by, rats and bugs. But we want everyone to be able to have a meaningful, self-determined life. And that means plugging them into institutions that enable self-determination. That doesn't just mean merely giving them $1,000 a month. It means giving them a job with power on the job to determine both the job and the sector and what's produced, and in addition to a fair wage. And if you don't do that, this whole prospect of having people who are so poor that we can't even police or fine. So Corolla was talking about how cops will just have their blinders on for all sorts of poor people breaking the law, and then get someone who's driving a nice car for a speeding ticket because they know that the speeding ticket will actually get paid if they get someone who's driving a nice car. So what does that mean? We'll have to think about it. All right. Thank you for your time. I hope this has been somewhat meaningful, and I hope this has provoked a quality of discussion or insight that you wouldn't always get. If you like what I'm doing, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, or just make a one-time enormous donation, and I will see you next week. Peace.